Hey everyone, in this video we're going to be looking at creating and deploying a web API in Python using the Flask framework and the Heroku platform as a service. Now this video is intended to give you a template and show you how quick and easy it is to create one of these web APIs and to deploy them using Heroku. So the plan for this video is that we're going to do this all in real time. We're going to code and deploy it. I'll try not to cut it in any way, shape or form. We'll see how that goes, see if I manage to do it without any bugs. So that's going to be the format for the video. It's not going to be an in-depth explanation of how APIs work or the different types of APIs, but it is going to give you a template and should give you a really efficient demonstration of how this works. So a few prerequisites to this. We're going to assume that you have Git installed and that you have the Heroku command line interface installed and that you have a Heroku account. I will drop all of these links in the description below for your reference. So let's get on and see if we can do this all in one take. Okay, so let's get started with this. So first we're going to make our project directory. So we're going to call this Monarch API. And then we're going to cd into it. I'll explain why it's called Monarch API in a minute while PyCharm's loading. And then we're going to initialize an empty Git repository because this is what we're going to be using to upload it to the Heroku servers. Now let's just create a quick git ignore to ignore the PyCharm files that I created. There we go. And now let's open up in PyCharm. So we're going to call it Monarch API because we're going to create an API where you send a year to the web app and it returns you what monarch was reigning in England in that year. Okay, so we're going to start off with our first file, which is going to be our app.py main script. Okay, so we're going to import Flask, which is our framework, and then we're going to create a Flask app. And there you go, there's our app. And then just to create one root, we're going to do that. So this is the URL almost, the directory. And then we're going to say the methods that we can use, which is going to be a GET request. And then we're going to call this home. And then we're going to return hello world. So this means that if someone sends a GET request to our address and then the main home directory, we're going to return this message here, hello world. Okay, so now let's have a quick look at accepting arguments. So we're going to go from Flask import request, and here we're going to say arg equals request.args, and then here is where you define which argument you want to get. So if we call this arg1, then if they submit a GET request with an argument of arg1 equals whatever, there we go, we've got it. Okay. So now let's have a look at using our data set. So I've got one here from 101 Computing, and what it is the start year, the end year, and then the monarch that was reigning during that period. Okay, so it's pretty simple CSV. We're going to have to do a bit of changing to it. So let's download that and bring it into our project. Okay, there we go. Now we're going to use pandas for this, so let's import pandas as pd, and let's go data equals pd.read csv data.csv. Okay, and let's give it some column names of start, end, and end for monarch, and let's set the index as monarch to make it a bit easier to manipulate. Right, now let's create an empty pandas series, and we want the index to equal a range starting from the first start date in that data CSV there, so data.s.min, and we want to finish in the current year. So let's import, from datetime, import datetime as dt, and let's do dt.now.year. Okay, so that's going to create an empty pandas series with the index of all the years starting from the first year up until this year. Okay, that looks about right. And now what we're going to do here is we're going to say for m in data.index. So we're going to go through all the monarchs. We're going to say series.lock this start date. So it will be data.lock m.s all the way through to data.lock m.e. And I'm going to say that's equal to the monarch. So each year where the monarch is reigning, their name is going to be there in the series. Okay, so this isn't going to be perfect because there will obviously be overlapping monarchs at some point, but this is just a quick estimate. There we go. So that all looks good. Okay, so let's have a look into this function here. So the argument that we're going to be taking in is the year, and we are going to say that they need to define the key as year here as well. Okay, and all we're going to be returning to them is the monarch that was reigning at that point. So remember, our index is the year, and actually just let's cast that as an integer. And so we're going to do series.lock year, and then we're going to put this in a try except. And so if they specify a year or just an invalid input, that will return us a key error, and let's return then a message saying invalid input, and then let's also just give them the years as well. So the start year will be series.index.min. Okay, and then we'll say all the way through to series.index.max. There you go, let's finish that off. Okay, so I'm just going to zoom out a bit. So you can see here we're just importing the Flask framework. Here we're creating a Flask app. Here we're defining a root. So here we've just got the home directory here, so you want app.root. That app is related to this app, Flask app object here. So you could have a separate one which could be app.root and then something like, I don't know, dog questions. That's just the first thing that came to my mind. I've just been out for a walk, so that's why. And so they would navigate to your address /dog questions and then put in their HTTP request there. Okay, cool. So that looks about it for our app.py. This looks okay, fingers crossed. I don't want it to be failing on me when we boot it up to Heroku. And now we need another file, which is going to be our requirements. So the way that the Flask server knows how to deploy it with the correct environment is we define our requirements here. And we don't really need to worry too much about our versions. But you can see here I'm also installing another package here called Unicorn, which I'll explain while in a second. Okay, so we've got Flask package, Pandas package, and then this Unicorn package. Okay, so we're now also going to define a runtime.txt. And what this runtime is basically telling you which Python version to use. So I know one that is supported on Heroku, it's 3.7.6. So there we go, simple as that, Python-3.7.6. Okay, now the next one, we're going to call it procfile. Okay, so what this procfile is it tells Heroku what to run when you boot up the, when you push up your code. So web : so this basically tells Heroku, I want the command that you're doing next to be connected to the web port. So, you know, the HTTP port is 80. So this is going to automatically connect whatever web app we're running here to that port. And the web server that we're going to run is Unicorn. And what Unicorn is basically almost like a connector between the Flask framework and acts as sort of like a web server. So we say Unicorn here, and then app, and then we're going to say app again. Okay, so these two things here. So the first one defines the file. So that's going to be our app.py here. and then the second one is the object within that file. So let's say this app, this Flask object here, was called server. We would put server on this second one here, but we're just going to keep it as app for the time being. Okay, so all this proc file is doing is telling Heroku to run Junicorn app, and then host that on the 80 port so that you can connect straight to it when you connect to your address. You don't have to specify the port afterwards. Okay, cool. So this all looks good. These are the only files that you need. So app.py, proc file, your requirements, and your runtime. Okay, so we're good to shut down PyCharm now and head back into our bash window. Okay, so as I said earlier, I'm assuming you have Heroku installed and that you've logged in. So now we want to go into our projects folder here, and we're going to add and commit all of the files that we've just created. So let's call this initial commit. Okay, so we've just created all of our files. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to type Heroku create. So this will create a web app, and then we can also give the name. So we're going to call this Monarch API. Okay, and so this is going to create the Monarch API web app. As you can see here, there you go, it has created it. So now we need to give it some code to run. So this is where we do git push Heroku master. And so this is pushing to the Heroku master branch. And Heroku knows to automatically build and deploy a web app that is on the master branch. So doing this, you can see it has pushed up the files, and now it's building it. So we defined the Python 3.7.6 version to use, and now it's installing all of the different dependencies. Okay, so you saw some just flash by there, and there you can see we've got Flask, Junicorn, Pandas, which were the ones that we defined. And you can see here it is recognized that our proc file has declared the web type so that it knows to deploy it and link it to this URL here. Okay, so let's wait for this to finish, and then we can have a look at this URL. Okay, so let's boot this up and let's see if it is loaded well. We know that it's loaded well because it has said bad request rather than something else that Heroku might say, which is something like Heroku app not loaded correctly. And the thing to do then is you do Heroku logs and then -- tail, and then this gives you the logs at the end of it. Okay, so we know that our web app has deployed correctly and there are no problems with that. Now we can look at giving it a request. So we go / and then give it the question mark, which is how you construct a GET request here, and we're going to say year equals, let's say 1654. Okay, and what we want to see is we want to return back the monarch that was reigning in that period. I don't know this off the top of my head, and we should see it here. So let's click enter. And there we go. Okay, not necessarily a monarch. I thought that was actually going to happen. But there we go. You can see that is returned. Let's just zoom in a bit more. It's returned the monarch that reigned in that period. Now let's do today's date, 2020. Oh, I was wondering, I thought I got my years wrong there. I forgot to do a +1 in the range, so it finished at 2019. Okay, so there you go. We've just identified one problem there. But we can also see that it has correctly returned back invalid input and given us the range to go for. Okay, so let's just try one more date. Let's go for the classic 1066. There you go, William I. And you can also see that the logs are running here. You can see the requests that it's received. So there you go, question mark year equals 1066. And you can see status 200 means all good. So there we go. Great, so there's a very simple web app. And you can see we deployed it very quickly. I don't have the time of how long that took. I'm going to say roughly 10 minutes, I'm not too sure. You can see it's very basic framework. All we're doing here, this is all just data manipulation, and all it is create your app object and then create your routes and your methods of making requests to those routes, and here you have just the functions. So it's as simple as that to use it with Python. And also deploying was even more simple, just pushing the repository to the Heroku web app. And we can see how easy it is to deploy again. So let's do a new commit. So here, this is where I got it wrong. I said I need to do +1 here because the range finishes at the number before this. Okay, so we've made our change. Let's open up git bash. Let's close down PyCharm. Okay, let's cd to the project. There you go. So you can see we've made a change to app.py. We're going to add that. Say we updated app.py. Okay, and it is again as simple as that. Just git pushing it to Heroku, and it will start building the app again and deploying the app again to this same URL. Okay, there you go. So you can see that it's deployed successfully. And now let's try 2020 again. There we go, we've got good old Lizzie. Perfect. So you can see how simple it was to create and then deploy this web API using Python and Heroku. I'm going to leave this web API up if any of you would like to brush up on your English Monix knowledge, or if you can't be bothered to Google and would rather send a request over to my Web API, I would be very privileged to have your request coming my way. Web APIs are so useful to be able to use in your projects, and it's great to know how to actually create them for when you use external web APIs as well. I've got quite a few projects coming up that I'm going to show you in the future that use these APIs, and so it's great to be able to create one yourself and learn how exactly they work. Along with keeping this web API up, I'm also going to be pushing the code up to GitHub, and I'll link that in the description if you just want a second look at it. Also, let me know in the comments down below if you've thought of any good ideas for creating a web API, and if you've created them, then I'd really like to have a look at them. So I hope you found this video useful. Maybe it's given you ideas for APIs that you could create and deploy and maybe use in your projects. Did you enjoy the real-time format or semi-real-time? I know I'll need to make a few cuts in post there. But yeah, let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed the real-time format, going through it, actually coding it on the fly. And if you did, and if you found this video helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you could drop a like. And if you're not subscribed, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. I'll have more content like this coming in the future, along with other projects that use APIs. And as always, you can leave a comment down below, drop me a message on LinkedIn or tweet me on Twitter. If you've got any comments, questions, suggestions, anything like that, feel free to ask. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.